Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host, Schwinny Poo, and this is episode 573. I am joined by Stacy. Stacy's actually not here yet, but he will be shortly. And once he is, we will talk about the Knicks. I'll be talking about the Knicks throughout this, even before he gets here. But before we do that, I do have to let you know this is your twice weekly reminder that Strickland has a Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/Strickland. We're truly appreciative for any support you're able to give. The $6 tier gives you access to full episodes of the Friday podcast of Pod Strickland. You also get access to the Strickland Discord where you can chat with other fans and the site staff. The $9 tier gives you access to even more podcasts like Strictly NFL or Strick and Roll. These are great places to get started if you're interested. And if everybody signs up, I no longer have to do these ad reads, which will be a benefit to everybody and society as a whole. Also, thank you to our sponsor, FanDuel. FanDuel has you covered for all of your sports betting needs. Not that you should need it, but if you so desire to play sports bets, FanDuel has you covered. Game props, live game bets, all the fun things. Okay, enough about that. The Knicks won a game against the San Antonio Spurs on Sunday. Probably their best, not probably, their best win of the season. I guess what you could say is definitely different stakes than the Cup final. There's no question about that. The Cup final is obviously its own separate thing. It was a awesome one-off victory for the Knicks in a high-stake situation. And they were successful in beating San Antonio on that night. But I thought this game was more comprehensive of a victory. Probably because, one, it was, that's just factually correct. But two, it was not the Knicks were super hot from the field and Jalen Brunson went off or anything like that. They ground out the Spurs. They choked them out. They kind of took their will from them in this game over the course of 48 minutes. It was just a steady grind. They got off to a bad start, obviously down 19-7 to start the game. But from that point on, they really dominated. They will go on a 26-2 run towards the end of the first quarter into the second quarter. And really, they never looked back. San Antonio was never able to lead below 8 or 9 points. And, eventually the Knicks were able to pull away. But it was, look, obviously the Spurs were on an 11-game winning streak coming into the game. Victor Wembanyama is a freak. We all know that. They have a lot of talent across the board. And, look, like cards on the table, the Knicks they got beat down by Detroit right after the All-Star break. They lost in comprehensive fashion, similarly, to Cleveland earlier in the week. And this felt like, they needed to put in a good performance. Just to maybe, I guess for fans, it's always a little bit more different. But like, for fans, for us, I think we needed to see them compete and really show up in a marquee game against a team that you'd consider a contender already this season. And they did. They really showed up in this game, and you got contributions across the board. And I think that's what really stood out about this game is everybody that played had their hand in it. Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges probably had his best game of the season. OG Anunoby. Josh Hart had a terrible first quarter. And then I thought in the second half he was all over the place. He was great. Alvarado was good. Mo Diwara, who I will definitely be talking about, was fantastic. I thought despite, a poor shooting performance overall, he was really impactful in this game. Mitchell Robinson, like everybody chipped in. And again, to get that type of contribution across the board was great, and it was dominant. I mean, they were better than San Antonio, flat out. I don't think there was any question about the quality of the victory. You know, did they get lucky or anything like that? Because they didn't. They didn't get lucky in this game. They comprehensively beat down a Spurs team that has been really good and has won a lot of basketball games and is getting the credit that they deserve. But the Knicks, they sent the message to the the Spurs, obviously the opponent, but the league, I think. And I understand why people had questions about you know this Knicks team. What's their ceiling? Are they really a contender? And all those things. Like, I don't really agree with any of that shit, but I understand where a lot of that was coming from. But yeah, after this game, I don't know that you can question that. They were really good. They were dominant. They did put the brakes on. They put the beat down on this team, on this Spurs team, and I can't say enough about how impressed I was across the board. I thought their flow offensively was really good. I know that the start of the game was not what everybody wanted, but Jalen Brunson had 24 points, 7 assists in this game. But look at the way he was getting his baskets. It was so much of it was in the flow. He was getting the ball up the floor, then he's getting off the ball and he's moving. And they had Josh Hart, his screening. I thought in the second half, it was really good. It was a good pivot for them to use Hart more as a screener, not just on the ball, but in dribble handoff actions and off ball stuff. So that was great to see. Karl-Anthony Towns only 5 of 9 from the field, but I thought I didn't have any issue with how involved or not involved he was. I thought everybody was in the flow as a team. They played together. Everybody got touches. You look at the shot distribution in this game; it's really nice across the board. So yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about how impressed I was with this with the Knicks' performance on Sunday because, I don't think they've been super inconsistent this season, but they have not had a win quite like this against a quality opponent who is in a good place. I after the game, I heard a lot of on podcasts, I heard a lot of like, oh, Wembanyama's tired and they've been on this road trip. And it's like, look, man, they played Thursday night and then they were off for 2 days. I don't want to hear it. And this idea that they didn't turn up that I heard from Bontemps on his pod, that was ridiculous. They start off the game, they're up 19-7. They're smoking the Knicks to start the game. And they played Wembanyama played the entire third quarter and he started the fourth quarter on the floor. So if they were not competing or they weren't trying or, they didn't show up and lacked focus, I don't really buy any of that. The Knicks just took that game from them and they bullied them. They bullied San Antonio in this game. They eventually beat them down.
What would you say to the idea that 3-point variance played a role?
Sorry, say that again?
What would you say the idea, devil's advocate, 3-point variance played a role? The Spurs missed a lot of open threes, etc., and the Knicks made their threes.
I don't see that at all. Like I've heard some people talk about that. I'll pull up the box score here, but I would. That was not my takeaway from the game. First of all, the Spurs are not a good shooting team. They don't have a bunch of 3-point shooters. That's worth mentioning. And I mean, that is what it is. You look at the the Spurs go 9 of 34 from 3. Obviously, that's not great, and that's well below their season average. The Knicks shot 35% from 3. They didn't have some dominant 3-point shooting performance in this game. The Knicks shot 44% from the field. The Spurs shot 42% from the field. What I would say is that, generally speaking, I don't buy into shooting variance if you took 20 less shots in the game, and that's what happened. The Knicks took 20 more shots in this game because the Knicks didn't turn the ball over 22 fucking times like the Spurs did. The Knicks also comprehensively beat them on the glass. I know that they gave up some offensive rebounds that were annoying, but the Knicks comprehensively beat this team up on the glass. They total rebounds are 54-41. The Knicks had 18 offensive rebounds. The Spurs had 10. Yeah, like I don't see it. I think this is a complete and utter just it was a mismatch on Sunday. I'm not saying like, you play them in a series or whatever in the finals that it would be a mismatch. I am saying on Sunday it was a mismatch.
The Knicks were clearly the better team.
They thoroughly outplayed them across the board from the start of the game, really. I mean, I guess 5 minutes into the game to the end of the game. So yeah, I was just it was great. It was a great performance. Like, I don't think that you could look at any player. You talk about the starting lineup down to Diwara, Mitch, Shamet, Alvarado, the 4 guys that came in off the bench that were, I guess that played the real minutes. All that group of 9 players, every single one of them contributed to this victory. They were all really good, and look, like you won basically every matchup here, right? Like OG Anunoby outplays Champagny, Brunson comprehensively outplays Fox, Mikal Bridges outplays Devin Vassell. I mean, whatever, you can go down and on down the board, but like that's what it was. The Knicks just they dominated. They were better, and if you have doubts about this team, like I don't know how much one game should change your opinion of this team, good or bad. But if you were on the fence, you probably needed to see you needed to see a game like this. You got it. This is a contending team. The Knicks are a contending team, and I know that they do annoying shit sometimes, and that they've lost some games that they shouldn't have lost. But they have had a lot of good wins this year, and they've had wins against teams at the top of the league, which was something that they really, that was one of the issues last year, right? Is you didn't feel that. You didn't feel that, oh, this team, we had all these doubts going into the playoffs because it's like, you didn't beat Boston, you didn't beat Oklahoma City, you didn't beat the Cavs, and a lot of those games were just, quite frankly, embarrassing blowouts. You had lost the season series to the Pistons last year, right? Like you had all these things kind of leading into the playoffs where you had doubts. This year, I mean, you look at the top teams in the league by net rating, right? So they haven't played Oklahoma City. They're going to play them on Wednesday. We'll see what happens there. They have won 2 of 3 against Boston. Boston is second in net rating in the league. They've obviously lost all 3 games to the Pistons. We know that. We've talked about that extensively. And that is a blemish. That is something that you look at and you wonder, what exactly is it about this matchup? We all have thoughts. Me and you have talked about our separate thoughts on this extensively. Whatever the reason may be, this is a team that has owned the Knicks this year so far. But then you look at the Spurs, right? You've played them 3 times. If you include the Cup Finals, you won 2 of 3. They've played the Rockets, 6th in net rating. The Knicks are 5th. The Rockets are 6th. Knicks beat them head-to-head. They beat the Nuggets head-to-head, 7th in net rating. They have won 2 of 3 against the Cavs, and I know the Cavs have undergone another roster makeover with Hart in there. I will just say, for as bad as the Knicks lost to the Cavs, I didn't feel that was a. I know it's a little bit of like, well, how can you say that when you just praise the Knicks for beating the shit out of the Spurs? Like, I came away not down on the Cavs or anything, but I was more annoyed with the Knicks' performance that night, mostly from a tactical perspective and kind of how the rotations were played out. Then I came away being like, wow, the Cavs really just smoked them. And then they split the season series against Minnesota, and that's your top 9 teams right there in the league by net rating. The Hornets are 10th in net rating right now, which is kind of crazy since they're only 30 and 31. But we'll see. The Knicks, they've played them, but it was a different Charlotte Hornets team than the one that's on the floor nowadays. But the point is, the Knicks they've beaten all these teams that are top of the league. They haven't beaten Detroit, which we again just mentioned, but like they haven't beaten Oklahoma City because they haven't played them yet. We'll see what happens. Other than that, they've beaten all these teams. So I don't know. I think it's a little bit. I get it. That 2-9 stretch was bad. It looked horrible. Like I don't know how anybody could deny that. But aside from that 2-9 stretch, if you take that out, and I know that's not how sample sizes work and blah, 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 but like, I don't know what the hell was going on with the team at that point, but it was obvious something was wrong that since has been rectified. But since that stretch, or if you take out that stretch, the Knicks are a plus 9.7 net rating team. They have like a 121.4 offensive rating and 111.7 defensive rating in those 50 games, I guess. 37-13. Like that's a clear cut contending profile, and I would say that the 11 games where they looked like one of the worst teams in the NBA is the outlier. That is the outlier of this team. That is not indicative of their performance, I don't think. It's not indicative of what their true talent level is as a team. And look, we'll see. Obviously, we won't have the answers we want until we get to the playoffs and see how everything unfolds. But we're 21 games out here from the postseason. And what I would say is I feel much better about the state of this team at 39-22 than I did about last year's team at the same stage. Last year's team, they started 40-20. They were 40-22. We'll see what happens tonight in the 62nd game of the season. But look, even if the Knicks lost tonight, I don't think that I don't know how anybody that's being reasonable could really argue that this team has not shown more reason for fans to believe in them than last year's team at this same point.
Yeah, I mean, I think even you were talking about this with the Cavs. The difference, I think, for between last year, right? They had the 0-10 record against Oklahoma City, Cleveland, and Boston. It felt like there were systemic issues, right? It felt like they couldn't guard Boston and they wouldn't try anything besides drop. It felt like similar issues against Cleveland. Their offense was just too good, and the Knicks were not doubling down on their own offensive strengths, and they just couldn't keep up with Cleveland. And then Oklahoma City is still probably a really tough matchup for us. But besides, after that fourth quarter, really in the first matchup, the Knicks didn't look competitive, and it looked systemic. I think that, so to your point, Detroit has felt that way. Are there other things I think the Knicks can try? Yeah, we don't have to get into all that again. But the other games they've lost, it doesn't feel like, to your point, the Cleveland loss didn't feel like this is just, the Knicks have this vulnerability, and, Cleveland can just twist the knife there and press on them. No, and it did feel like that on the other hand, and obviously we're biased, and we're gonna, be more willing to say this than someone like Tim Bontemps, but it did feel like that was true when it came to. It did feel like this was true when you talk about what happened against San Antonio, where they did bully them on the offensive glass, and they've been able to do that in the past. They were generally able to funnel shots towards their shooters. They were able to. I thought they did a great job of strategically doubling and trapping Wemby. I think that that's the difference to me. Kind of what you're saying. I think that it was just a really well executed game plan. They didn't do everything perfectly either, by the way. I would have liked more to see. I wasn't as happy, I think, with Brunson's performance or the process as you were. He's going to make his shots, but they're still, in terms of crisper passing, playing faster. I think they kind of play faster out of necessity because of because when Alvarado's in, because he can't create the same way. But it's not the same when Brunson's in, they can rely on the half court, so there isn't always the same urgency. But you saw so many things, and I think the arrival of Mo Diwara is really, really important for this team. Because, suddenly the Knicks have wing depth, first of all. You have OG and Mikal are playing better. Hart is playing better, maybe the best ball of his Knicks career. Shamet is a great 3-and-D. Great. Maybe he's a very, very good 3-and-D player. Who can do a little bit more off the dribble, right? He's not a standstill guy. And then you have Diawara. So you're suddenly the Knicks are a little bit flush with wing depth. And we've talked about this, especially they've traded out a lot. They've traded now, obviously, the picks for Bridges. And they're not going to be picking, even if they kept those picks, they weren't going to be picking high. the reason why dynasties fall, or why the end of, for example, the Warriors, why the end of Steph's career right now looks like it's not going to be able to result in a ring, is they haven't hit on those kind of picks. So I think Diwara is exactly the kind of pick that you need, the kind of player that you need. He's only 19 and he's confidently shooting the three. He had some great defensive possessions on Wemby, just switching all over the place. That, I think, year one, he's going to be someone who shifts games in the playoffs. And long term, the sky's the limit. So.
Yeah, I think the Diwara, look, you don't want to get ahead of it, or you don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here with Diwara, because he was the 51st overall pick. He's a young guy, blah, blah, blah. All that being said, it is extremely hard to have watched him over the course of the season. Watch him, forget the course. Just think about, when he was drafted, when you watched him in Summer League, and then into, how he's developed stint by stint, game by game, when we've seen him on the floor over the course of the season. And the player we saw against San Antonio on Sunday, that is so far ahead of what we saw from him on the floor in the very, very limited minutes he got to start the season. His confidence, not that his confidence really has ever been lacking. I think that's kind of been noticeable since the jump with him, is that he plays with an energy, which is obviously infectious. But there has always been this quiet confidence to him at times that I think can create some issues for him. There are times he has had turnovers, bringing the ball up and things of that nature, where you're like, all right, maybe a little too much dip on his chip, but that confidence is not something that is easy, and that's something that a lot of young players struggle with. Look at Frank Ntilikina, right? That guy from the start, you were like, man, he has no confidence. He doesn't play with any confidence. He's just so happy to kind of like hang out on the periphery of a game. Dadier is a player like that, where every time he gets a chance, you're kind of like, all right, the effort is one thing. He's not, it's not like his motor is amazing, but you also feel like he's just too content to kind of hang out on the edge of a game, not really kind of try to get involved, not force the issue. Whereas Diwara is at the center of it. And I think the biggest compliment you can pay to him is, he shoots 4 of 13 from 3 in this game. And yeah, he's chucking. Might have been a little bit too much at times. Look at his teammates, though. They're continuing to give him the ball as he's putting up shot after shot after shot. This is not a player that they're looking at like, fuck this guy, I'm not going to give him the rock here. No, like, they are continuing to feed him the ball. They're continuing to give him the opportunity to make plays. They have the confidence in him to continue to trust in him to make plays. And that, on a team that, this is a pretty veteran-heavy group. These are a bunch of guys that are in their primes, as we've talked about before. This is a team that has championship aspirations. For a young player to, and look, this is not like he was the 7th overall pick or something, right? He was the 51st pick in the draft. This is a guy that a lot of people, when we drafted him, was like, 1, who the fuck is this guy? 2, is this a draft and stash, right? And he had no cachet to come in and earn a role. He was not some high priority prospect for this organization to draft or to develop, rather, once he was here. There was no mandate handed down from Leon Rose on up high to be like, hey, Mike, you everything you're doing is great, but you got to make sure to get this Mo Diwara kid a lot of minutes. Like, he was not a priority like that. He had to fight to earn the role he's had, and it's not been steady, right? He's had competition, obviously, in the form of the vets that are on the roster. But even if you look at, right, the buyout stuff, right, they bring in Jeremy Sohan, and Sohan immediately kind of started siphoning some of the minutes from Diwara, and then he comes back and he gets opportunity, and he takes the opportunity, right? He's taken the opportunity when given back to him again, and he's run with it, and that is, it says so much about his confidence, I think his mental toughness, right? Mike Brown talked about it after the game where he said, Mo's maybe the most confident player I've coached. Talking about a guy who's coached, I don't know if you've heard of these dudes, but like LeBron James, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, he's coached. I don't know if he should be as confident as he is, but Draymond Green is certainly confident. But for him to say that about Diwara says a lot. And he's just been a revelation, I think, for this team. So I'm again trying very hard not to get too ecstatic, but like you said, I mean, when you just watch him play, right? Like, forget the numbers. I know, again, box score, the shooting, forget that. Just watch him play in that Spurs game. That lineup, right, with Alvarado, him, OG, Bridges, and Cat. We've kind of lamented, right, over the past year and a half, going on 2 years now, that starting group, like with the three wings, it's good, but it's not quite where you want it. And yes, the Josh Hart on offense thing is part of it, but also we've talked about the defense it's not quite where you thought it could be, right? That's something we've talked about a lot. And I think a lot of time, there's a lot of reasons for that. I don't think it's just down to one guy. I don't think it's just because Brunson's negative. I don't think it's just because Cat can't play drop or whatever. Like, I think there's more to it than that. And obviously, Alvarado being in that lineup as a better point of attack defender than Brunson makes a difference. But you watch the way that Diwara and Bridges and OG are communicating and passing on switches and, moving on their assignments. And it was spectacular. I don't think that's an understatement, actually, or an overstatement. It was spectacular. They were flawless in a lot of ways. They were fluid. It was great. I mean, that's quite literally kind of the, when you were talking about OG and Bridges, Wingstop, right? When you see it in games like that, you're like, oh, that's the vision. He was part of the reason for that vision coming to life on Sunday, Diwara. His defense is way beyond what I think anybody could have realistically even hoped for coming into the season. So far ahead. And, he is switchable. He is a fluid defender. Like, for his size, the way he moves is pretty spectacular. And yeah, like, he had good moments, right? Like, he blocks Stefan Castle at the rim. And, there are moments, like you mentioned, get switched onto Wemby, and it's like, okay, but he's not like totally, a shit show here. And look, he's a young guy. We've seen him also get into foul trouble in previous games and commit some stupid fouls. And that's part of your learning curve as a young player. I don't think that, I don't think that we should expect him to consistently deliver the type of performances that he's put together here the last couple of games. But he has that in him. And when you're talking about going into the playoffs, right? Like wing depth, like what happens if OG gets in foul trouble or Mikal Bridges gets in foul trouble, and Josh can move down, but you're kind of undersized. Like, well, you might not have that problem if Diwara is somebody that is truly trustworthy. And right now, it's hard not to put your trust in him based on what we're seeing and based on, forget what we think. It's obvious that Mike Brown is a very big fan of Mohamed Diwara. So, look, kudos to the front office for picking him, but kudos to Mike Brown for giving him the opportunity, because Tom Thibodeau was, one, he's a very good coach. Two, again, we have talked about this extensively. I think he gets a bad rap as a developer of talent. I think he's unequivocally a very good developer of talent. His track record in Chicago and Minnesota and New York speak for themselves. But regardless of that, an issue that he's always had in his career also is trusting in young players. Just that simple fact, just putting your trust in a young player. And
do you think he would be giving Diwara minutes right now? Do you think Diwara would be getting?
No shot. Mohamed Diwara, 51st overall pick, is not getting minutes in his rookie season for Tom Thibodeau in a year where we are expecting to contend. It's not going to happen. And Mike, to be fair to Tibbs, like I think that might be the case for a lot of coaches. I don't think Tibbs is necessarily unique in like whether right or wrong, you see a 51st pick, like you're probably, those guys can get lost in the mix and not get the opportunities that maybe they deserve at times. But Mike Brown has given him opportunities, a lot of opportunities. And, I think he was a little bit slow to do so. We talked about it earlier in the season. It was one of my frustrations with Mike Brown early in the season. But you've got to look at where we are now. We're 61 games in the season, and he's got this kid in his rotation right now, in a 9-man rotation for a team that, again, is fully expecting and attempting to contend for a championship this season. Obviously the majority of the credit has to go to DOR. It has to go to the player, but you have to give credit to the organization for picking him. Then you got to give Mike Brown a lot of credit for not just developing him, but trusting in him to play on the floor.
Yeah, and this is something we needed. We saw it last year in the playoffs where Indiana had more depth than we did, and we didn't see the same. We didn't have the same kind of diversity. Now you can attack many different ways. Another question I think is it possible we go 10 deep in the playoffs, where do we go 10 deep in the playoffs? And Deuce comes back. I still think we need Deuce, because who are you going to take out? I think all of those guys give you something different. I wouldn't want to take out Landry Shamet. I wouldn't want to take out Jose Alvarado. I wouldn't want to take out DOR at this point, unless this really turns into unless this really turns into a pumpkin. Unless he turns into a pumpkin. Yeah, I want all these guys playing. So it'll be interesting to see if Brown continues with that. It definitely felt like the rotations, the way he deployed against San Antonio was much better. I think he's, hopefully he's starting to figure it out even more. And we'll continue to see. We talked about this last time, right? This is no longer this part of the season where you're just experimenting for experimentation's sake. You are getting ready for the playoffs, especially the stretch where they're playing a lot of contending teams. It looks like Mitchell Robinson's playing tonight, which I would imagine that means he's not going to play against Oklahoma City. Which that does, so I don't know how much we can read into that game, but these are the kinds of games now where you're going to be looking at Brown continuing to push the right buttons. And against San Antonio, it's tough to have much to criticize.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I know there are people that are like, why are we playing Mitch tonight and not holding him out for the OKC game? All I will say is, like, yes, it would be awesome to beat OKC. Yes, having Mitch Robinson available for that game would help help your odds of winning against Oklahoma City. I don't think that's debatable. But the Raptors are not wholly out of the race for a top 4 seed. They are 3.5 games behind the Knicks. They're 3 back in the loss column. The Knicks do have the season series wrapped up against them, but this is a conference matchup, and I can totally understand why the Knicks would maybe make this a higher priority game than one against Oklahoma City. So I'm fine with that decision. Worth mentioning, the Knicks now on FanDuel, they have the 4th best odds in the conference. They're at plus 420. They were at plus 470 last week. And I still feel like that's a value. I know that there's a lot of varying opinions on the New York Knickerbockers, but I think they have shown, I really do feel very strongly that game on Sunday, they showed you they have what it takes. I think people are way too down on them, not just fans, but obviously the public here. And yeah, the rest of the conference, if you look at it, Boston's at the top at plus 250, Cleveland's at plus 260, and then Detroit's at plus 410, New York at plus 420. I got to be honest, I understand Tatum is coming back for Boston at some point, and I know that their numbers look great. Their metrics look really good. I don't take this team, I don't want to say I don't take them seriously, but I have a very tough time fully buying into this team can come out of the East with a front court that features Neemias Keita, who is good, by the way, no question about that. He is good. Neemias Keita and Nikola Vucevic are their primary centers. Like you look at the rest of the conference, or at least the top teams, and I'm sorry, yeah, like Karl Anthony Towns and Mitch Robinson are unequivocally superior.
All three
Duren,
teams can pound them on the glass, right? Like all three teams, offensive rebounding is a strength. The front court is a strength. So that really is bad for Boston. All three of their top teams. I mean, yeah.
The Boston thing is so weird though, because they've now morphed into this awesome offensive rebounding team too. I don't really know what to do with that. But like, I just think the front court stuff is a bad matchup for them. Like Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, Paul Reed, like I take those guys over the Boston centers. And then I take, I know that everybody has fun time making fun of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, and I certainly partake and enjoy it as much as the next person. But yeah, I take those guys over Keita and Vucevic too. So I don't know. I think they're a little bit overvalued. I don't want to get lost in the sauce here. I want to get to some comments that we got. This is from Jeffrey Glenn. Thank you for the super chat, Jeffrey. Cardiac Clarkson will be heard from in the playoffs. I like your optimism. I certainly like your optimism. And maybe there's a scenario like, you're down final shot of the game or something like that. Is Clarkson a guy that maybe you trust in that moment? I don't know. I don't know what situation would see Clarkson get on the floor, but and personally, I mean, cards on the table, like I am very happy that Jordan Clarkson is not consistently playing for the Knicks right now. I do appreciate him seeming to embrace kind of the role that he's moved into now, which is kind of just be a good vet, support the guys on the sideline, be a good teammate, all those things. But yeah, like to the point of, can he contribute for the Knicks in the playoffs? I don't think so, but we've seen Mike Brown try things. And I don't know that the book looks pretty damn close to me on Jordan Clarkson's utility as an NBA player, but Mike Brown may have a different opinion than me and give him a chance or something.
Yeah, I mean, I like the optimism too, and I don't want to shit on anyone's opinions. It could certainly be a case where Alvarado's struggling. There are times when he struggles in the half-court offense and the ball sticks a little bit. Deuce, we know, is not going to be doing those things. So there could be a scenario, if the offense is a little bit stagnant, right? We saw this against the Pacers a couple years ago where Alec Burks suddenly is the only, they bring him in because they're not finding any offense. And finally the Burks that signed shows up. So it's possible. But at this point, you mentioned end of game scenario. If for some reason you need a backup guard, I don't think Clarkson is a better shooter than Deuce at this point. There might be a better shot creator, but you would ostensibly have Brunson on the floor at the end of the game. For defense, Alvarado obviously is better and Deuce. For playmaking and, pushing the pace even, I would you can probably give that to Clarkson just because he's more dynamic with the dribble, but he's lost some burst. And, Alvarado plays with energy and he keeps moving without the ball, and he has overcome his limitations. So I just don't know who he's going to get minutes from. And if you're going to play three guards, I would rather play. I'm not sure I would give him minutes over Kolek at this point. But if it's end of game and ISO and for whatever reason they don't have Brunson available or something, then I could see it, I guess. But I think if Cardiac Clarkson is what we're relying on in the playoffs, I think something went wrong, but we'll see.
Yeah. Can't know that. Thank you for the super chat from Subcommandante _Marcos from Canada. I see our friendly neighbors up north. Muhammad FC, he says, look, yes, Mohamed Diawara, we talked about him already a lot, but it is very hard to not be excited about what you are seeing from this player.
And he was fasting too, by the way.
Yes, he was fasting. That is right.
Still is, but that was a daytime game, right? I imagine, I don't know how it works in the nighttime. Maybe he can break fast before a game. But the whole thing, I would imagine, is very challenging. So really impressive.
Yeah. It's again the production you're getting from him. Like, he put up 14 points in 15 minutes, 5 of 14 from the field, 4 of 13 from 3. He had 4 rebounds, a steal, a block. Against the Bucks, he played 23 minutes, 10 points in that game, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. But it's more than that, right? It's what you're actually seeing from him. I mean, he's played 192 minutes since in the last 15 games. Okay, for the Knicks. So last 15 games, he has played 192 minutes. The Knicks have a plus 19.2 net rating in those 192 minutes. Is that sustainable over no, I don't think anybody, I'm not of the opinion anyway, not yet, that he is, single-handedly producing this swing. Obviously, they've benefited from the addition of Alvarado. He's played a lot of his minutes with Alvarado. Like, there's more behind that than that. But the fact the team can thrive and has thrived with him on the floor, it's why he will continue to get chances. And it's why, look, when Deuce comes back, it'll be very interesting to see how the rotation shakes out, because you're going to have now 5 guys off your bench. And we know that Mike Brown, he likes all these guys, right? Like, obviously, he likes Mitchell Robinson. He likes Mo Diwara. He loves Landry Shamet. He loves Deuce McBride. He loves Jose Alvarado. Like, he likes all these guys. So, a couple years ago, when the Knicks kind of started pushing in their chips in a big way, trading for OG, moving Grimes at the deadline to bring in Bojan and Burks, then bringing in Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns in that summer. The main thing going into last season was like, all right, like the starting 5 is awesome and Deuce is great and Mitch Robinson is great, but like, the depth is kind of iffy, and do we have enough firepower off the bench and all these different things? And now you look at this team and the depth is good. Like, it's good. They have kind of developed it and they've built it out since the start of last season, but it's good. And he has options. Like, I think to the point you made earlier about Diwara kind of, who knows if he's a piece that's going to extend our title window or whatever. But he gives them more versatility, right? There's just, because of his size and because of the ability he's showing you to take on different tasks defensively, you have options with this guy, and he creates and gives you more versatility than you had previously, right? Because as much as I think we like Landry Shamet, and I love Deuce McBride, you love Deuce McBride, and I think it can be a mistake to be too focused on like, well, he's 6'2" and Brunson's 6'1", and them together is a problem because they're not tall enough. Like, I don't love that mindset, but it doesn't hurt having more size, especially on the wing, off the bench. It does not hurt to have another option. And look, we've even talked about before where it's like, man, OG's awesome, but like, he's also he's so valuable to this team because he is their one true like big wing guy that they have. Well, now you have another. That's a big deal. That offers you a lot. And yeah, look, I don't want to just turn this into like the Muhammad Diwara show here, but it's just really hard not to be super excited about what you're seeing from him as the season goes on.
Yeah, and I said this in the Strickland. There's the whole, after that Detroit game, Jonathan Macri talked about the team not being likable. I don't want to litigate those comments, but even you and I last year were saying certain things. Not that the team wasn't likable, but just it was less fun last year watching them play, even though they were a 50-win team for much of that second half. Some of that was the results. But I think, one thing that we've missed, especially, it's a fact. When we traded IQ and RJ, I remember you were very, I think you changed your mind very quickly when we saw the on-court improvement and what OG brought.
Oh yeah, dude, it took me about I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes of watching OG on the Knicks to be like, yep, good trade. Never doubted you, Leon.
But I think it was for us. I think me and you were bigger IQ fans, but there are a lot of fans that saw RJ grow here, right? And they've seen him, and whatever her thoughts on him, he has done well in Toronto. And when this team was coming up, you had quickly then Deuce and Grimes and Sims and RJ continuing to grow. And you're seeing these guys, these young, exciting guys, that we really all rooted for. And we haven't had a young guy like that. We had flashes of Hukporty last year. We had, Kolek has shown some flashes, but we didn't really have a guy that's like, this is like homegrown talent that could be a real big deal going forward. And we have that again. And I think there's something to be said that brings a little bit of joy to fans, because we know these vets, and it's also the relationship with vets for us as fans. Like, when they don't get it done, we're going to come down hard. We have expectations that when they don't meet, we come down hard, we get disappointed. So that, like, for them to exceed expectations for Bridges or Brunson, they have to play really, really well. I mean, Bridges was the star of the game on Sunday, and we haven't really talked about him. I think I'm willing to. I think he did a great job, but it's just, we expect so much from these guys that it's fun to go back to the times a little bit when you have a player where every good thing he does surprises you. It's a little bit like that Gordon Ramsay meme, right? Like, oh, you sweet child versus you fucking donkey, right? But you need a little bit of both, I think, to root for. And it's what the Knicks have been looking for. Knicks fans have been looking for a long time. They took a swing on Dadier to get this kind of player, a big wing who gives you some defensive versatility, can knock down threes. I am curious, once teams start guarding Diwara. I mean, the Spurs did start to close out pretty hard on him, and he kept firing. So I like that. And the overall shooting line maybe wasn't that, but great. But he had some rim in and out. He didn't look very off on many of his. There weren't movement threes or anything, but a lot of them were contested.
You don't really need him to be a movement 3-point shooter, because he's so tall, though. You know what I mean? Like, so it gives him a natural, right? It kind of he can get off his shot. I mean, I guess, look, we haven't seen him take a bunch of tightly contested threes, but you would think in theory anyway that he has an easier opportunity to get off a volume of threes, whereas like Deuce has to jump fucking 15 feet in the air to get his shot off.
Yeah, and so that, and like, I think Omar has mentioned this in the strict court, they don't have a lot of guys with quick releases, but like you said, with him and with Cat to a lesser extent, just the sheer size means you have more leeway in terms of that. You don't need to be Klay Thompson with your release. So there's a lot of excitement, and and look, especially whatever my skepticism might be about Detroit, I think the most concerning thing, which I get, and like, is that Detroit has seemed to play Detroit bully ball on us. Even last year in the playoffs, they were able to make that a much more competitive series than a lot of us expected. Maybe a lot of you guys did. I know Prez was telling me that I was taking them too lightly, and we can talk about Tibbs's decisions till the cows come home. But they do play a physical brand of basketball, and the Knicks had started to get that reputation as more of a finesse team, and it looked like that in those 3 Pistons games. Diwara is one of the guys that gives you that, and all of a sudden, I think I talked about this, but I think fairly or unfairly, they get that stigma because of Cat, Brunson, and Bridges. Brunson is a physical player, but he's still undersized. Bridges is very much a finesse player. I think that gets overblown because he does do a lot of very valuable things, but it's a fact. And this is, a lot of these fans grew up, watching Starks and Oakley and those teams, and 90s basketball in general, where intensity and physical toughness, like, a guy like Bridges would have probably gotten a lot more, flack back then. But, Bridges and Cat are known as finesse guys. One, I think Cat, that's an unfair label because he's been really crashing the glass hard. And, he doesn't get foul calls. I feel like he has been better about dealing with that and not leaving his teammates hang out to dry on defense. He's made it. We'll talk about Cat in a second, but I think some of the stuff Press has talked about in terms of passing out of drive shows that that's like he is learning to evolve his game. He's putting in the effort. You look at the rest of the team, and they got a bunch of tough guys. Mitch is maybe one of the most physical players in the league. Landry Shamet plays with an edge. He doesn't have much size, but he is feisty. You saw them multiple times really get. Hart is playing now on defense the way we wanted him to play last year. But there's times when I'm like, you're being a little too aggressive. I'm surprised they're not calling a foul. I think they were doing a good job at the refs were letting stuff go, and then they would call it tight. I think the Knicks did a better job than San Antonio did in terms of navigating that at many points. But Alvarado is a pit bull, right? Deuce, we know about him, very physical, especially on defense. And then you have Diwara now, who's like you said this, early, a couple of weeks ago. Like he will feel him. He is going to make you uncomfortable, and that could be whether you're Victor Wembanyama or it could be if you're a guard. So it really gives this, and I think that's what really is special about this team compared to some other teams, which the Knicks have. Versatility is a double-edged sword, right? Because if you have versatility, right, then maybe you don't have a clear identity. Who is this team? But if you have one clear identity, which the Knicks had under Tibbs, you're only going to win games one way. This team has shown they can beat you. They can go 5 out. They can guard up. I think the last 15 games at a top defensive rating. Haven't even shot the ball that well. They can, if you want to switch, they do have still one of the best isolation players in the game. You want to go small on them, they can pound you on the offensive glass. So they can play fast, they can slow it down and play the possession game. So there's many, many different ways this team can beat you, which to me, it does give them a higher ceiling than Detroit, Cleveland, Boston. Really, I think any team besides Oklahoma City. But I think, maybe the floor also looks a lot lower because, when a team is kind of committed to their identity and the Knicks, just aren't great at any one thing enough to combat that, it can look pretty bad. Overall, I'll take that trade-off, though. I'll take the higher ceiling. I think we all would.
For sure. Jeffrey Glenn, again, thank you for the super chat. He says, I'd hate to play Boston because I can't stand Stan Van Gundy glazing him being Hugo Gonzalez. I just can't stand Stan Van Gundy, so I'm fully on board with this. He's probably one of the most annoying announcers to me. He seems to do nothing on Knicks broadcasts other than complain about any call that goes in their favor. And the one positive thing he will say is that on every broadcast that he does for the Knicks game, he will make sure to let you know that Josh Hart is as good in transition as LeBron James or Giannis Antetokounmpo. So, yeah, I'm good on Stan Van Gundy. I wanted to discuss one Josh Hart a bit, change pace here. And tied to this, right? Knicks Tape, this is our pal Luca. He asks, how much more of the triple wing lineup with Mo do you think we'll see since it played very well against the San Antonio Spurs? Now, I certainly want to see more of that lineup. We've already discussed it on this podcast that it's a lineup that's both intriguing and, at least in the early stages of their time together, has proven to be effective. I've seen a lot of people kind of raise this as you could go with this instead of, playing Josh Hart as much, or Josh Hart shouldn't start, and it turning into morphing it into that kind of conversation. I know we've all thought and discussed the Josh Hart conundrum in the starting 5 thing going back to last season, right? We've been talking about this forever. We talked about this even before last season. We talked about this when Josh Hart was being defended as a non-shooter against Philly in 2024, and then again in the next series against Indiana. So, this is a conversation that's gone on for a while. And I understand it. I definitely don't think anybody who is very pessimistic about how this lineup will perform against quality opponents, into the second and third and hopefully fourth round of the playoffs. I definitely understand that. And I don't think it's unfounded to have concerns over it. Where I kind of struggle with it is the basketball reasons, we can debate that, right? And that's a separate conversation. You can't just look at it in terms of that, because we know that a head coach's decisions are not just about an individual, like, it's not simply just about picking the lineups and looking at net ratings and that's all there is. Like, you have to manage egos, you're managing personalities, and we saw earlier in the season when Josh Hart wasn't starting, it affected his effort. He was not as effective. He talked about it openly, right? Mike Brown talked about it openly, and he said that he even regrets that he didn't start Josh Hart. and that everybody on the coaching staff or whatever was telling him they should start Hart, and now we have come back to using the starting lineup that we did last year. Now, whether it's right or wrong, I think there are a couple things that need to be established. Josh Hart wants to start. He views himself as a starter. He wants to start. Okay? The other thing we need to accept is whether you think that reflects poorly on Josh Hart, whether or not he should be more open to coming off the bench, those are that's all fine, well and good. The reality is he isn't happy coming off the bench. And whether you like it or not, he also seems to be a player who is a leader in the locker room, a vocal leader. I think he provides a voice of reason at times, which is funny to think about because he's also ridiculous. But that's a lot for a coach to kind of take on his plate and then make decisions off of. And, you know, one thing you got to say about Mike Brown is, while he has stuck with the starting lineup, he certainly has not stuck with it to the degree that Tom Thibodeau did, and he has shown a willingness to adjust and adapt in game and be flexible in game with who he closes with, how he runs his rotations. And that ultimately is why I don't know how worth it is to constantly harp on the starting lineup is bad, the starting lineup is bad. But then you watch the first 5 minutes of the Spurs game and you're like, all right, maybe it is worth harping on because this shit is fucking awful. And we saw them really struggle with that starting lineup. We've seen it many times, right? It generally tends to happen against good teams who will put a wing on Cat and a center on Josh Hart. And okay, now this changes how we go about it. Now,
and it's a center on Hart, but we should say, right? Like Wemby, when they were doing that, Wemby was just hanging out in the paint, right? Like, so it's technically on Hart, but you post and say, well, get your ass in the post, Cat. Well, they're going to send doubles, and Cat has improved at passing out of them, but it's not really, you don't want to be doing that a ton, right? So
yeah,
you don't have to be your foundation.
Right. And look, it's not just limited to the first quarter of the first half of the Spurs game. I think in all three games against Detroit, it's been an issue. Against Cleveland, in the last game, and even on the Christmas Day game, it was an issue. And we saw last year, right? Every game against Cleveland, every game against Boston, every game, like against OKC, like these are, like you saw these really high level opponents take the same strategy and apply it consistently. Now, there are things you can do to capitalize on the fact that they're not defending Josh Hart. We saw them do that in the second half, right? And we've seen Tibbs last year and Mike Brown this year, involve Josh Hart more as an on-ball screener, as the primary screener and pick and rolls for Jalen Brunson to kind of force the center to come into the action. So there are things you can do, but it is challenging. And I think the valid concern is ultimately, is it worth it? Does it actually make sense to do this, or are we better off changing the lineup? I don't have a great answer for that because in my brain, I'm like, yes, you should probably change the starting lineup. But when I start thinking about managing a locker room, the personalities, all this type of stuff, like I think it's a lot more complex than just, we need to have a 5-out lineup, or you need to play a guy that they can't just put their center on, and it's not that simple. I think there's more to it than that, and that's unfortunate that that's part of it. But these are human beings, and that's always going to be part of it. So Mike Brown, it's again worth mentioning. Like Mike Brown did not start the season starting Josh Hart, right? Like he started with Mitchell Robinson, that starting lineup instead. So, and I did not care for that. That was not the guy I would have looked at starting in place of Josh Hart. But I think it shows that he's not married to any specific thing. I think he is trying to generally make decisions that are rooted in data, but you can't just have decisions rooted in data. And data is a nebulous term, right? Yes, the statistics matter, and net rating and offensive rating and defensive rating, all the stuff that we talk about, it matters. But another form of data is understanding the dynamics of a locker room. And we don't know that. We don't have access to that information at all. There is no NBA.com/stats/feelings. There's no NBA.com/stats/intangibles, like locker room chemistry. Like that's not a page that you can go
Facts
to
don't
and
care
look
about
up.
your feelings, Schwinn.
Yeah. But like it's obviously real. And I think there's been enough said, that we have heard said by Josh Hart, by Mike Brown, by reporters, the local beat guys talking about it, that we have to assume that this choice is occurring in at least some part due to the need to manage a locker room. And again, whether you agree or disagree with that, or whether you think that makes Hart a bad teammate or whatever, like it's reality. And it's their reality for at least the rest of the season because the trade deadline is gone. Like it's over. There's no more roster shifting that's going to happen. This is your team. So you got to make the best of what you have. And I am cool ultimately with Mike Brown rolling with this starting lineup, even though my preference would be to have a different starting lineup. I'm cool with him choosing the starting lineup. I think he has shown an ability to pivot tactically to get more out of that group. It's worth mentioning that lineup. I think it's like a plus 10.69 rating. I'll look it up after this for the season. It's just been against these top teams that put these centers on Hart where it can have real big issues. But I'm fine with the decision because I think that he has shown an ability again to pivot tactically with that lineup and also pivot rotationally to move off that lineup during games and preserving your opportunity to win and compete. Again, is it ideal? Maybe not, but I think every team probably has something that they have to deal with that isn't exactly what they would prefer to do at all times, but you have to take into account different factors. And, I kind of understand where Mike Brown is coming from with all of this.
Yeah, so I think those are all good points. I am going to first, I'm going to provide a rebuttal, not dismissing the locker room stuff, but why I think in this case is overblown. I think locker room dynamics are very real. I think when we were all wanted more Obi Toppin minutes at the expense of Julius Randle, that's a big deal to me because I don't think Randle would have reacted well. And that at the time was your franchise player. And then even later on, he's your number two. So that's the kind of situation where I think this matters. I'm not even talking about benching Randle, but if they had really started giving Obi heavy minutes at Randle's expense, especially that disastrous 21-22 season, I get why that didn't happen. It's very difficult for me to see Josh Hart pouting, creating problems in the locker room, not willing to sacrifice, not playing with the same energy. The one thing maybe you can say is he is shooting the ball well and he's willing to take threes this year. Does his confidence get affected? I could acknowledge that. But as far as Josh being a bad soldier, we've seen he got benched in the playoffs last year. They started Mitch in the middle of a series. And he said, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, even though I think of myself as a starter. And this guy wants to win. There's that one loose ball really sticks with me where,
Yes.
he got away with a little foul, but he hit the floor in a regular season game. But bringing that up even feels, trivial because that's what he does all the time. I don't think that changes if he comes off the bench. I don't think last year the minutes I think did diminish some of that, especially on defense because he's playing so many fucking minutes. But that's not even happening this year. But I think it would be a tough pill to swallow. He might mention some things to the media. Do I think his or anyone else's gameplay would be affected? No, not. He's just not that guy. If it was, there are guys like that in the league. I think OG is a little bit like that, where he's the kind of guy who would take that kind of thing maybe a little bit differently. Josh Hart is just the last guy. He's a team first guy. His best friend is the star player. Maybe I think Prez mentioned this. Maybe that's who needs to really get Hart to relent a little bit on this, and would be tasked with doing that if and when they made that kind of move. I'll also say why I don't think it's as big a deal. I mentioned he's been shooting more. They've had counters towards this. And, it hasn't been the kind of, anchor on the team that it was. But, series are won on margins, so it may have to come to that. And if we lose, it sucks that in order to do that, we had to go to our, you were losing in Detroit, then 2-1 blowout against Boston before they actually made the change. Along with 2 games they very, very nearly lost because they had dug themselves such a big hole. It sucks that it had to come to that. So I would rather not have them need to lose a game to sell Josh on the idea. But I also think it's being overblown. The lineup is playing better this year. His defense has been much better. And, the Deuce lineup hasn't been as effective. Small sample size. Totally agree with that. There's on-court reasons why having Hart out there makes sense. And why, back to Luca's question, the 3 big lineup, the 3-wing lineup is good. It's not just Diwara's defense. The other guys play more energized because you saw Diwara constantly looking to find Bridges and OG on kickouts when he would drive. You saw him bringing the ball up. They were using him as a little bit of a hub, which we saw in Summer League, and I didn't expect to see at all in his rookie season. But you're starting to see that, and Hart gives you that too, right? Hart gives you a secondary ball handler that the Knicks don't really have. Bridges doesn't play with that kind of force. Hart, I would argue, has a tighter handle, a little bit better. He's a better passer, better improviser, pushes the ball, gets them to play with that pace in ways that, the other contenders, Deuce doesn't do those things on offense. And, just putting Brunson next to another shooter, even though Deuce does a good job moving without the ball, he's not really a creator. So, and you don't have other perimeter creators that are proven like that. So that there is a basketball argument for it. And so far the results have not been so bad that this is something to harp on. I do think that eventually, if that lineup is starting to give them some holes in playoff games, you'll just see a quicker hook. I think the other thing is,
I want to say this. It's worth noting those 5 guys this year. This is per Data Baller. This includes all minutes, so all leverage, low leverage, medium leverage, high leverage, whatever. They played 338 minutes together. They have a plus 6.2 net rating, 117.4 offensive rating, 111.3 defensive rating. So it's not a bad lineup, right?
Which it was last year. Let's be clear.
It became bad at the end of last year. I think for the course of the whole season, I'll check that again, but I think it was like something like it ended up being like a +3, which is like very mid for a starting lineup.
Yeah,
that's like extremely
legit negative, right?
Yeah, that's like extremely mediocre for a starting lineup on a 50-win team.
That has 2 all-stars and all defensive caliber wing, all those things, right?
It was clearly not performing to the level you would expect, even accounting for even if you expected the Josh Hart, is him not shooting is going to be a problem. I still think it was not a great look for Tom Thibodeau that 5-man lineup was as poor as it was. So Mike Brown deserves credit for, okay, now this lineup is at least performing better. But, is it the best lineup? Is it their best lineup? I think you would agree with this. Your best lineup doesn't need to be your starting lineup, right? Teams have won championships in all different ways with, the most famous example, right, is the Warriors' death lineup. And that's a lineup they routinely do not use until the very end of games, fourth quarter of games. So, I'm not saying your best lineup has to be your starting lineup, but you generally would probably want your 5 highest minutes, your 5 minutes leaders effectively that share the floor all this time. You would want it to be a stronger lineup than plus 6.2. And the data and our eyes and what we see and have watched now for multiple years with this team, you are that's not their best 5-man lineup, and they have different ones, but it's a weird it's a weird team in the sense that, like, I like the depth. You like the depth. I think they have a lot of answers. You mentioned that they're versatile, or we talked about their versatility earlier. Nemo says here, very versatile team. They can also do something of value because they can't make a three on a given night. But yes, the Knicks are an extremely versatile team. They have all these options now off the bench, especially when Deuce comes back. You have all these different things that you can use, right? And we've seen Mike Brown go with Cat at the 5, Mitch Robinson at the 5, obviously double big. He's tried lineups with no center, right? He closed the game with OG Anunoby at the 5. So they have all these options. And I think the real conclusion to draw, at least for me, this is just how I feel about it, is their best lineup probably just changes on a night-to-night basis. In the sense of, like, I don't think there's a clear-cut, these 5 guys, regardless of who we're playing, regardless of the night, this is our best lineup. I don't think they have that. I think they have versatility, and I think Mike Brown has to use the regular season and has been doing that to kind of explore different lineups, different configurations. And when we get to the postseason, he's going to have to call the right numbers. He's going to have to dial up the right buttons and make the right decisions. And I think that will mean and does mean that you're going to see more variance in your closing lineups than you would maybe for a lot of other teams, and certainly in comparison to Tom Thibodeau last year, where you kind of knew, like, exactly what 5-man lineup was going to close. You just knew it. So I don't know what their best lineup is, and honestly, I think anybody that's telling you I know what their best lineup is lying. Because to me, there's not a consistent answer. I genuinely believe that their best lineup changes. And I guess if you want to make it a broader conversation of, like, well, maybe they don't have the best lineup, but they are best when they're 5 out or whatever. Like, I just don't agree with that. And the numbers don't agree with it. Like, they have lineups where Mitchell Robinson's on the floor, right? And that are great. They have lineups with Josh Hart on the floor that are great. Like, these are not 5 out lineups just purely based on that. I mean, Mo Diwara, we're all very happy that he is comfortable and confident taking threes. I don't know that you can call him a 5 out kind of player yet. Like, he's not commanding that respect of this as of this moment. So it's a little bit of a rush to judgment to label him in a way that is different from Josh Hart. Like, I'm not saying they're the same player, but they have been getting a lot of similar treatment from defenses at times. So, again, the data is not clear cut. And as, like, I know what you're talking about with Josh Hart. He says all the right things, and that's all fine and well and good. It's been reported by enough people, and Josh Hart himself has talked about it. He talked about
his play would actually diminish. Like, he's not going to make a stink.
He might not make a stink, but he did not look happy coming off the bench. I mean, we saw it. He was visibly, like, pouting during that game in Chicago earlier in the season. I think that was on Halloween night when he was coming off the bench. Like, and look, some of that is he was coming off of the injury, obviously. So, maybe he was just rusty and whatever. But we can go based on what he talked about. He wasn't happy coming off the bench, and he needed to adjust and get his recalibrate his focus.
But if you're going to make a move, isn't that a better argument to do it now then? Because then it's better for him to go through that now than in a playoff game, right? If that happens.
Not if you think he's gonna, like, if you're gonna lose him. Like, he wouldn't be the first player in the world to just completely kind of, like, lose their focus and
yeah, I don't want to belabor this, but I think we're just gonna have to disagree. I just think it's hard. He's built different. I think he's very mentally strong. But I get the argument on the other side. I just think with this particular player, I would be less worried about that, especially if you're not cutting his minutes, which I don't think any of us is calling for that. But we want him to play a lot. He's one of the most important players in this team.
You're gonna play less coming off the bench. Like, I know, like, we can say it, but, like, look, the guy, he's now started for what? He's been starting basically for 2 years, right? 2 years now. Like, yeah, I mean, he's a great teammate, and he's been a great Knick, and I have very few issues with Josh Hart. I just would like him to shoot threes more consistently. But like, and also maybe lock in on off-ball defense more often. But like, I don't buy that he's just gonna like. Why would he? If you move him to the bench, you're basically singling him out, right? You're saying like it's you. You're the problem with
already doing that.
But if I'm him, I'm going to be like, how is it me? Like, I'm look at everything I've done. Look at all these. I play my ass off for you. I fucking played through injuries. I play 48 minutes when the coach wants me to play 48 minutes. I do all this stuff. Like, I think it's very much on board that he is probably not going to be a happy camper and take it well, because we fucking saw it. Like, we literally saw it at the start of the season where he's basically having a tantrum. And it was what the hell is wrong with this guy? This is shitty. Like,
to quote Don Draper, that's what the money is for. He's gotten paid. Like, Deuce has even more of a right to be upset because this is where
that's a separate argument. I'm not arguing whether Josh Hart should or should not feel the way he would. That I'm like, I think he would be annoyed, right? Let's just start with this. My hypothesis is if you bench Josh Hart, he's going to be annoyed. And that could be a really big problem for internal dynamics in the locker room, right? Let's just go with the hypothesis, all right? So let's play this out. Okay, so you're telling me, well, that's what the money's for. I agree, that's what the money's for. But that doesn't change what his actual reaction might be. So, like, it's a separate conversation. Like, do I agree that he should be fine? Yeah, like, should he be fine? Should he be happy and accepted and understand why the decision is being made and look at his bank account and see, well, I am being rewarded very well financially and I should be cool with this and I should be a great teammate? Yes, he should do all of those things. I cannot disagree with that at all. Will he? Is that actually going to happen? That's where I think there are concerns probably from Mike Brown's perspective. And if he also is making a determination of like, well, yeah, maybe that's not ideal, but I can work around this. I can start these guys and keep them happy and keep everybody happy and still get to the lineups and work my rotations to get to the stuff that makes us a great 48-minute team. Like, is that, again, it's not ideal. It's probably very difficult to do and probably much harder than me or you or anybody may think it is. But, like, to the point you're making, Mike Brown, that's what the money is for.
No,
that's what the money is for.
I just think Hart is a much more mature person. He realizes there'll be a championship on the line. We're not talking about your next contract or anything, but I get the hesitation.
He's extension eligible this offseason.
Sorry?
He is extension eligible this offseason, Josh Hart.
Yeah, but this front office is taking care of guys. But I do think why I get beyond that also why it's not happening and probably won't happen. There's only one person I think Hart would accept being benched for. Let's look at the candidates right now. Shamit. So frankly, it's very difficult to buy the idea that just because it's 5 out, Shamit has played his ass off. And it looks like he's very well respected in the locker room. We saw him praising Mo and encouraging him, and that's clearly had an effect. He seems to have this budding bromance with Bridges. I really liked how they played together, and beyond that, there was one play Bridges gets a steal, feeds Landry Shamit for a dunk. Shamit returns the favor. They have good chemistry, and they're really good both off-ball defenders. They're smart guys, but he's still a journeyman vet who is on a minimum. So yeah, I don't think Hart would take that easily. Deuce, last year I totally would have gotten it. This year it's a little bit more suspect, but one, the net rating doesn't really back up the idea that they need to replace Hart with Deuce, and there's some on-court reasoning that would match it. And two, Deuce is still one of the younger guys in the team. So I don't think, and he's a perimeter player. The only player I think that you could do that and I still think on aggregate, especially against the top teams, is the Knicks' best lineup. it does depend on matchup and all that. I do think that is Mitchell Robinson and Cat. Mitchell Robinson in place of Hart with the starting lineup. This team does one of the advantages they have against top teams is they do a great job offensive rebounding. Against Detroit, it's been less effective, but it did matter when Mitch did get to play last year against them, and it forces Duren to work harder. It keeps them from getting out in transition, which is something they've really been much more effective at this year. And then obviously against Boston, it plays right into your strengths and exposing that Boston front court. And we've seen it against Cleveland. We've seen what Mitchell Robinson does to Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. And then now you have Cat next to him. You're doubling down on a strength, and you're getting Hart has played good defense, but now you're getting a real rim protector, which allows OG and Mikel to be more aggressive in passing lanes. Reduces the risk factors around Brunson. Cat's probably a more effective. Cat we've seen since Minnesota is a more effective defender at the 4. And Mitchell Robinson, because of his gravity as an offensive rebounder, doesn't create the spacing issues that you might see pairing Cat with another non-shooter. So that's the only way I see them doing that. And then even if you want to argue, well, Deuce has earned a lot of respect. The players know him, and he's a vet at this point. He'll be coming off injury in the playoffs. So to put him in the starting lineup coming off injury, that's probably not going to happen. So I think if you're looking for the starting lineup to change, my guess will be Mitch. And I have a feeling by the playoffs, unless he's still on a minutes restriction at that point, you're going to do that. And the last thing I would say on that also is it hasn't always been borne out by the data, but we saw it in the playoffs. Teams go hack-a-shack on Mitch. So that's actually a great thing early on in a game or in a quarter, because you're racking up fouls. And then when you move them out and you bring in Deuce, you bring in Hart, now you're saying you're in the penalty. That should really juice the offense. So that would be like my feeling is eventually they'll make a starting lineup change, and it won't be 5 out. I think it'll be Mitch. And Hart will still get minutes because you're not going to play Mitchell Robinson 30 minutes like a starter. But that also allows you to not have to use that lineup so much, to put Hart in lineups where he's more effective, where he's not just getting the ball and they're just giving him the Russell Westbrook treatment and saying bomb away. He gets the opportunities to create out of drives. He gets to play with more pace. He's doing those other things. So that's what I expect to happen eventually.
Yeah, I would be very much against them starting Mitch Robinson. I cannot say that in more.
Because of the minutes restriction?
The minutes restriction, I don't think it makes any fucking sense to your rotations because you don't have a third big that you trust. That's
what they got Sohan too, right? So if they try that, maybe.
Yeah, okay. I'm very good on Jeremy Sohan.
We should give credit to Brown, by the way, for being willing to pull the plug. We were criticizing him for playing Mo Diwara. You have to give him credit.
Yeah. But no, the minutes limit, the fact that you don't have a third big that you trust, that I think it fucks up your rotations. Also, you already have, again, at full strength, you would have 4 guys in your rotation that are nominally perimeter players. Like now you would insert a 5th and you don't have a big on the bench. Like that whole thing just seems, that was why I didn't like them starting Mitch to start the season, or I wasn't a big believer in it. I didn't like it. There was that one random game where against Philadelphia where you started double bigs that I didn't like that. Like I don't like it at all. I think it's
double bigs, maybe not at the starting lineup, but I think they will have to use that lineup at some point, especially against a team like.
They will. I mean, he has used it. He has used the double bigs. That's been a lineup that he has used throughout the course of the season, and I'm fine with that. I think you should definitely use that lineup at various points, but I like it way more as a change of pace off the bench. I think that's almost all of where they have good minutes together is in that capacity, not as a starting group. I mean, if you go back to the playoffs last year, and I understand that like part of this is influenced by the fact that you stupidly, had to change your lineup in the middle of the 2 games down in the Eastern Conference Finals, and you had no idea what you were doing because you didn't try anything all year. Like, I get that, but they were not good in that series when they started. Like, they were down 20 in game 3. I mean, they won the game, but they didn't win it because they had that double bigs. They won it because Carlton Towns went crazy and whatever. But like, I don't know. I don't buy the double big thing as more than a change of pace against the best teams. I don't think the Knicks have the right personnel for that to be their best 5-man lineup. Not consistently anyway, and definitely not from the start of games. So I would be very, very dubious about going that way.
Can I ask you this then? Sorry. Let me ask you this. So I do think like I can just work around it. That, like we said, in playoff series, those margins matter a lot. So I'm not sure if you really don't think that this is going to be an effective lineup against those top teams. I don't think then you can justify starting it. But leaving that aside, what do you? And you said it could be night to night, right? Forget the locker room stuff. Just on court, what do you think? Maybe not even their best 5-man lineup, right? But what would be your starting lineup? Again, leaving aside the locker room dynamics and all of that, what would be what you would pick as a 5-man lineup
to start games?
Yeah.
Personally, I would just start. I would just start Deuce. I know that lineup this year has not had a great net rating. I would just start it because I want to see. I don't think it has. They've not played that lineup much. It's not got a great sample. But I would try Deuce. What's up?
Deuce is out right now, right? So
yeah,
if it was
of course. I'm saying right now, like I said, like I don't really have a huge problem with what Mike Brown's doing. I kind of like I get it. I get why people talk about it a lot, and I definitely have those thoughts, especially during moments like the Cavs game or the Spurs game. And yes, I wish in those moments at times that like Mike Brown would pull the trigger faster. And he, again, to his credit, in the Spurs game, he did. Like he made the right calls and he benefited from it. But right now, like I guess if I was going to make a change right this second, I would like to see Diwara. I mean, I would like to see it.
They're not benching Hart for rookie either, right? But yeah, that's I think maybe long term that is the idea.
Point. Like I'm not that upset about it. Like I'm not. My main thing is just
actually better. Sorry,
I think Shaman is a bench player. He's a really good bench player. And what I mean, look, for whatever it's worth, on the season, Josh Hart is he's in the 82nd percentile in EPM. Landry Shamet is 71st percentile. So, even the nerd stats prefer Josh Hart. But yeah, like if it was again, this is why realistically, I don't think you can change the starting lineup. You're not going to bench him for Landry Shamet, and you're not going to bench him for Mohamed Diwara. So, and you're not going to bring in Mitchell Robinson to start games because he can't. It fucks up a lot of things, and he can't really sustain the workload. Plus, if he's going to sit out back-to-backs, then you're going to have to change your starting lineup based on just his availability. Like, none of that makes sense to me. And at that point, Deuce is not playing right now. He's hurt. And I'm not starting Alvarado. That would defeat the entire purpose of bringing Alvarado in. Like, none of it actually makes sense if you think about it. Like, why would I change this? Just be quicker at times in games. And, is Mike Brown perfect with that? No. Like, even on the Christmas Day game, we talked about it at the time, right? Where it was like, yes, the Knicks won the game. It was an awesome comeback. Tyler Kolek was awesome in the comeback, playing alongside Jalen Brunson. They might never get to that lineup if Josh Hart stays healthy, right? If Josh Hart doesn't get hurt in the fourth quarter, maybe they never get to that lineup. So he's not perfect with it. It's not like he makes the right call, but he has shown a willingness to make those calls in more situations and more often than Tom Thibodeau ever did. And ultimately, like, I think I'm fine with that. Mike Brown has done enough that I'm willing to extend him some benefit of the doubt here, is what I'm saying. Like, I am willing to accept that I don't, like, now that we had Tom Thibodeau as head coach, now we have Mike Brown as head coach, and both these guys ultimately landed on this being the starting lineup. I would tend to believe that it's not purely that they are ignorant to the data and that there's more going on there. and that some of it has to do with like locker room dynamics and managing feelings and personalities and all those things. And the main frustration with Tibbs wasn't just that he started that lineup; it's that he played them so fucking much. He wouldn't stop playing them. I mean, I think last year they played the most minutes in the league of any 5-man lineup, and it was about like a country mile. It was like they played 978 minutes or whatever, and the next closest lineup in the league is not even close to that. So it's not just the one thing. It's there was so much more to it than just the starting lineup is bad. It was like, the starting lineup is bad, and yet you leave it on the floor for the first 7 minutes of each half, and then you also close this lineup every single fucking game, no matter what's happening. That is, or was rather, I should say, the frustration. And look, I'm just pulling it up right now. But last year, among 5-man lineups, so this is for the 2024-25 season, the Knicks guys played their starting lineup played 940 minutes together. 940 minutes with the same starting 5. It's a lot of minutes, man. And they were not particularly good. Like they had a sorry, let me see this right. They had a plus 7 point. Oh, sorry, this is for this year. For last year, for last year, that lineup played, again, 940 minutes, and they had a plus, we're getting there, they had a plus 3.3 net rating. That's in the regular season. If you go to the playoffs, this lineup was not very good. They played, it's loading, NBA.com/stats, pick up your pace. Whatever, they played 335 minutes. This is actually fucking mind-blowing. They played 335 minutes in the playoffs. What do you think their net rating was?
I'm not sure.
Just guess.
Neutral?
Minus 6.2. Minus 6.2 net rating for that start. That's the frustration, right? It's not just that you started them. It's, okay, you started them and you played them more than anybody should play a lineup, period. But, definitely one that's failing. Their next highest 5-man lineup was the one with Mitchell Robinson starting in place of Josh Hart. That group played 65 minutes together. Like, the lack of variation exacerbated the problem. Whereas I think this year, Mike Brown, his willingness to, play to, look at how Diwara got his minutes, right, against the San Antonio. It wasn't like he just came in and played 7 minutes straight in each half. It was like, he plays 4 minutes here, 3 minutes there. He comes in with Landry Shamet. Okay, now I'm going to take out Diwara, put Josh Hart back in. Like, you're mixing and matching. You're playing around with these combinations more. I think that's fine. I think that's ultimately where you want to be. And honestly, isn't that the variation that we all wanted more of? Like, yeah, we can debate the starting lineup, but I kind of think that argument just misses what you're really mad about. I think when people are having this conversation now is you're upset that the coach isn't landing on what you perceive to be the best idea. But you're ignoring that he is actually showing the flexibility to explore the options that you do prefer. It's like, yeah, is it perfect? Is it everything that you want? Maybe not, but it's like, what, 80% there, 75% there? And no coach ever does everything that the fans think is right, or that is actually right, objectively correct. But I think Mike Brown is he's landing the percentages better than Tom Thibodeau certainly did last year.
Yeah, I don't think that's up for debate. And I think these are many of the arguments I've made as well. Like you, I'm not that pressed about the starting lineup. And I'm not so sure that I said there's an on-court case for Hart. He provides more creation than Deuce or Shamet. You mentioned the difficulties with starting Mitch, even though I do think that's our best 5-man lineup, or most effective against most teams. you made the case, the rotations and Mitch's own limitations in terms of minutes. So that I agree with you that what we wanted to see was if you see that this lineup is maybe suboptimal and you need to start it, don't double down and make that the most played lineup in the league. All that and Brown is, so that's not a criticism of Brown there. I do think though that if that's going to cost us stretches in games against Detroit, against Cleveland, against Boston, against, if we're lucky, Oklahoma City, Denver, San Antonio, like I'll keep saying this, and you said it before, the margins are razor thin. You have to win on the margins. And if you're bleeding a few minutes, and I'm not saying that you necessarily would, or that it wouldn't happen with a different starting lineup. But if that's what you believe in your heart, no pun intended, then you kind of have to just get Josh to suck it up. I do think that that's the case. But he may not have that strong belief either, which I think also would be justified because, any starting lineup is going to have some limitations independent of anything in the locker room. So,
yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. I think, look, I just want to finish up with this because this is kind of the crux of the entire argument. Shax, who does a lot of good work for the Strickland and also has a really great Substack. If you're not subscribed, you definitely should. Has a lot of cool tracking stuff that he's been tracking.
He doesn't call it a sub show.
Yeah, his sub shacks. Here's what. So look, we talked about the Hart being defended by Bigs thing. 8 teams have defended Josh Hart with their bigs for 10 plus possessions in the starting lineup. The impact is stark. When this happens, the Knicks post a 98.7 offensive rating and a 109.5 defensive rating, which is a minus 10.8 net rating. When teams don't put their bigs on him, the numbers jump to 126.6 offensive rating and 113.9 defensive rating. That's plus 12.7 net, and that's over a 20-point swing for the Knicks. So, again, that's what the data is. And then here's what he also said. And this is what I noted and mentioned in the second half. Something we were talking about a lot on the Strickland the other day, or yesterday, I should say. Against the Spurs in the second half, the Knicks leaned on him being Josh Hart, more as a screener, generating 1.33 points per possession over the first 9 possessions. The talent is there to exploit this coverage, but the key is consistency, whether it's taking the open shot or setting screens and creating opportunities for teammates. The team and Hart need to maintain that approach. So, look, the numbers are not great, but then you see, okay, but maybe there are ways to capitalize on it that we need to lean into more of. And I agree with this because this is kind of the stuff that really pissed me off or frustrated me last year, because it was like, okay, fine, the starting lineup has its issues and, whatever, but like, what are you actually doing to try and find solutions to it? And it just felt like Tibbs didn't really look to try and find solutions. It was just like, just play better, execute better, and like that was it. Mike Brown looks like or it seems anyway, that he is trying to constantly and actively find solutions to improve that lineup and find counters to how teams are defending it. This is one, obviously using Josh Hart more as a screener. I think more both on and off ball has to be a part of that equation. I know and I think you made a good point where I think a lot of people are like, well, why can't Cat just post up, right? Why can't Cat just post up? Like he's got a wing on him. He's got a smaller guy, and I'm just throwing the rock and let the big man dominate, like Shaq would say. And the point you made is accurate because it's not that easy, actually, because it's not like the 5-man is staying close to Hart, right? Wemby was just hanging out in the paint the whole game. So if you're posting up Cat, it's not like he gets an awesome mismatch and a clean, way to attack the basket. It's like, no, like the 7-footer is still going to be there in his path, and actually it's going to be a double team now. So, yeah, like Mike Brown hopefully leans more into, and hopefully, Josh Hart himself kind of leans more into being a screener. But yeah, like it might just be something that you have to adjust and adapt to in real time, right? There might be nights where it's like, hey, you know what? Even doing all this stuff is not yielding the kind of opportunities that we need to create. And, that's where it'll be difficult or it'll be interesting to see what buttons Mike Brown pushes and when he chooses to push them. Again, this is a really good team, but I do think this is a kind of quirkier team to manage than others might be. I don't know. It's interesting. I think it's a really interesting conversation because I don't think it's straight. I don't think it's nearly as straightforward as it often gets discussed online. Right? It's like, oh, just play this guy instead of Josh Hart, or fuck that. Like Josh Hart's awesome. We can't no. I think all of it is true. I think there are times Josh Hart's awesome, and there are times where Josh Hart is a bit of a problem that maybe you don't have the answer for on that given night, and it's time for somebody else to step up.
And you need him to be awesome, to be clear. So, if that is going to cause an issue, if you have a choice between we get a diminished Josh Hart coming off the bench versus we're playing a suboptimal lineup, but you're getting the most out of him, and you're still playing really good lineups otherwise, then yeah, you'd have to take the trade-off and say, like, if that's what it takes to get what you need out of Josh, which, to be clear, they do need Josh Hart at his best in whatever role he plays, then yeah, I mean, if that's a real risk, then it makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. As far as more positive or optimistic conversation, I know you were not necessarily of the opinion that Jalen Brunson had or was as good as others may have thought against San Antonio. I thought he was really good. I can't lie. I thought this was one of his best games in a while. Not because he was individually fantastic or he made a bunch of shots and he put up 42 points or something like that. I just thought he let the game come to him and he was comfortable letting other guys kind of operate. Sometimes I don't think that he has the right kind of balance of those things. And it's something that I really feel he was struggling with, for a couple months, honestly, where it was like, okay, like he has quarters where he's just trying to be like the best facilitator ever and not even looking at the basket. And then there are other quarters you're like, it's, it's time for me to go hero mode or whatever. But I thought he struck a really good balance in this game. And I was very pleased to see that. And then additionally, like he had a really good game against the Bucks. I know it was the Bucks, so nobody cares, but like he was great in that game. He had 22 in the first quarter, but it's not just that he had 22 points. I think the way he got those 22 points was, again, a lot of it was in the flow, in the rhythm. It wasn't him totally, going ISO mode and dominating the ball. It was within the flow of the offense. And that's 2 games in a row where I think you can say that. And they need him to tap into that consistently because it hasn't been there for a couple months. But they need him to kind of keep stacking these performances. He has another opportunity tonight against Toronto, a team that he's historically done very well against. So hopefully we get a third one. And then, look, the main thing, or not the main thing, but it has to be said, we've talked a lot on this podcast about a lot of guys. Mikal Bridges was fucking awesome in this Spurs game. He was awesome in this game. And
he's done that a lot against the Spurs. They seem to be a good matchup for him. I don't know why. They have length and athleticism. He just shoots the ball really well. I mean, there was that 42-point game last year he had on Christmas Day. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy that we barely mentioned him in that game, but you're absolutely right. He was awesome.
Yeah, and I think kind of the reason why you don't mention him or why we didn't mention him is I don't know how to put it, but like, when I rewatched the game and like, I know in real time as I was watching it, you're like, oh, Bridges having a really good game, right? You could feel it, you could sense it, you could see it. It was all there. When I'm rewatching it, like, and then what he put up, right? He had 25 points, he had 5 rebounds, 6 assists, whatever he had. But when I rewatch it, I think it's how he got those points. And I think that's why his numbers fluctuate so much is he more than anybody to me is like, and I guess OG as well, just to an extent. I think he is such a bellwether for how the system is working. Like when the system is good and things are flowing, I think Bridges plays his best and he is his most productive consistently. When that suffers and it's a little bit more disjointed and, things are stagnant and guys are kind of trying to take matters into their own hands, he can kind of fall back a little bit. And I don't, that's not his game. That's not the situation I think he thrives in. And it can lead to a lot of inconsistency. And we've seen that the start of the season, the guy was great. And then, last couple of months, it's been really up and down, really choppy. But it was great to see him have a great game against a big time opponent. He is like all these guys. He is key to whatever chances the Knicks have to win a championship. He is vital to that. Obviously, OG Anunoby is too. I mean, we didn't barely talk about OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby was great in this game defensively as well. Like, they were both fantastic.
Do you think Diwara kind of amplified that even more?
It's possible. Like, I that's what it felt like when I was watching it. Not that, especially in the second half, Josh was really good defensively in the second half. But like, it feels like Diwara maybe frees them up in a way that Josh quite doesn't. I mean, some of that might be Josh is a smaller guy, so maybe the assignments he has and what coaches are asking of him is a little bit more rigid than Diwara, who I think is a more flexible defender. Even if, obviously still the developing player, so the ups and downs will be there. But yeah, I think there's something to that potentially. And look, regardless of what it was, they need those guys, man. Like, they really, really need OG and Mikal Bridges to be at their best. Especially when you play these really, these top end teams. When those guys are good, it changes things. And look, they both struggled against Detroit after the All-Star break. They both struggled against Cleveland earlier in the week. So for them to have this game against the Spurs was huge. But
and again,
look,
right? Vassell is a good young long wing. Castle is very impressive. I think you're a little bit lower on him maybe than consensus, but very athletic guy. OG fucking stuffs him at the rim. OG is playing with great energy, I thought, too. Like, Wemby did put him on a poster, but I respect that OG didn't shy away, that he went for the block. So, they're all playing really well. I think with Diwara, he brings a couple of things. One, I think there's like length becomes greater than the sum of the parts. So, you're just going to have more opportunities. You saw there was one where I don't even know if it was Diwara was pressuring the ball. There's a very ill-advised pass thrown, I think, by Castle, and Bridges he was baiting and sitting behind screens and waiting to get pick sixes. And I love that, right? Because we talk about Mikal being passive and, and not imposing his will. That is one way he can do that. And I love that he was in transition. He was going to the hole. And even when someone was trying to contest, he was throwing it down. I really love to see that. And he just seemed to be playing with a lot of confidence. And I think that does tie back maybe why I was a little bit more muted on Brunson, because especially in the second half, it seems like guys play with a slightly different energy when Alvarado's out there. When it's not Brunson heavy, they play with more energy, more confidence, right? Bridges was knocking down those corner threes, quick release, no hesitation. And they know they're getting the ball. They're playing hard. They're moving the ball. And then, like one play, and I hate to pick on this, and everyone knows I think the world of Jalen Brunson, but one play, and this is not really stylistic. He made the right decision, but Mitchell Robinson closed out. Wemby has what looks like a wide open elbow jumper, and Mitchell Robinson fights hard to close out, contests it, and forces a miss. Runs his ass off down floor. Brunson's pushing. It's a 2-on-1. Should be an easy lob. Brunson throws a really poor lob, and Mitch still works really hard to tiptoe, corral the ball, immediately saves it back to Brunson, who fires up a three, which wasn't a terrible shot. It nearly went down. But that's the kind of thing where if you're Mitchell Robinson, it's like, I busted my ass. I should have had a lob that put me on SportsCenter. Instead, we didn't even get any points, right? So those are the kinds of things where you'd like to see Brunson just be a little bit sharper, and really elevate the guys, which would take this team to a completely different level, because you see it when they're playing with the bench. And yeah, they're not playing against the top defenders, but even with Wemby out there, they're able to win a lot of those minutes with the bench because Alvaro is pushing the ball, because he knows he can't ISO. He's moving it quickly. If he gets stopped, he's making decisions. And he made some bad ones. He took a terrible fadeaway with Wemby in his face or not Wemby, but he didn't get where he needed to be, and he threw up a midi, and I don't think it was late shot clock. And he had, kind of stagnated. But, I thought there were definitely in the second half moments where Brunson was kind of ball stopping a little bit, which is often what they do in the fourth quarter anyway. He's the closer, right? But, to your point, I think it's definitely been more encouraging the last couple of games, the trajectory in terms of decision-making, having more consistently a better understanding of, how to attack, where to pick his spots and how to play off of the other guys. So definitely progress. I wouldn't deny that.
Yeah. I think it was not a great play. I know what play you're talking about, but I don't know. I guess I haven't really seen any evidence of like guys getting annoyed with Jalen Brunson. That being said, though, we've talked a lot about, Bridges gets moody if he doesn't get enough touches. OG gets moody if he doesn't get enough touches. Cat can kind of drift out of games. Got to be said, Cat, I think, has done such a great job of recalibrating his game. He's taking less touches. He's getting less shots up. And I know that people get annoyed with that a lot. I don't, because I think the way he's playing right now, this is the way. Like, this is the way for him to just get his game streamlined properly, and have the impact consistently that he can have. Like, I do think that he's nursing an injury. I don't think he looked a little bit sharper to me, actually, physically, after the All-Star break. He had one really nice drive on the Spurs, where he's able to beat Wemby to the rim, but he kind of smoked the layup. Wemby has that effect, obviously, but I think Cat's look better. His defense has been much better this season. It's pretty wild.
I don't think it's as good as fancy stuff, but he's definitely been a plus defender. I would say that.
Yeah, I mean, just on take these numbers for what they are, but he's having he's having his best defensive season according to defensive EPM since his fourth year in the league. He's in the 90th percentile for defensive EPM this season. He's also in the 92nd percentile in offensive EPM. So despite shooting issues and relatively speaking anyway, the impact he has cannot just be measured by his individual numbers and individual production. He changes the game for the Knicks. He changes the geometry of the floor for them. He opens things up that no other player can. So he's been awesome this year. And I just think it's been cool that he's finally starting, I think, to get his due from Knicks fans in a lot of ways. But it's been there all year, despite his shooting struggles, despite some of his issues finishing at the rim. Carl's had a really good season. And honestly, I think this is a much better season than he had last year, where great offense last year, much better offensive season than he's having this year. But defensively, it's night and day. And some of that, again, you got to give credit to Mike Brown, because he's not just sticking him in a drop, possession after possession after possession. I think some of the improvements defensively are reflected in using Karl Anthony Towns higher up the floor. They've talked a lot about icing pick and rolls more, forcing them to the sideline. So I think just being a bit more aggressive in your coverages has helped him as well. But yeah, he's been really good, and hopefully, again, it was only 5 of 9 from the field, but it felt much more impactful. And I think the biggest thing is there was not a lot of stupid possessions, right? There was not a lot of wasted energy, I guess, is maybe one way to put it. So, yeah. Look, it was, again, great game for the Knicks, and definitely their best win of the season. They play Toronto tonight, and then they have Oklahoma City tomorrow night on second night of a back-to-back. Stace, before we get out of here, what are your predictions?
I imagine Mitchell Robinson is going to play tomorrow, so I'm not expecting a win against Oklahoma City. I hope that they have some interesting things they do in terms of combating OKC's coverage. OKC does play double bigs, so I'd imagine you're going to see, and the luxury is they can. I would imagine they're going to put Hartenstein on Hartenstein on Hart. You can post. I mean, Cat on Chet is a good matchup, or Cat on one of the wings. But like we said, I expect them to just double with Hartenstein and let Hart shoot. So I'm less optimistic about that game. As we've talked about, OKC is not only very talented, but particularly not the best matchup for the Knicks. And then tonight, Toronto did lead against the Knicks. They built a lead, the last time we played them, but then the Knicks just blew them off the floor. I just think compared to other teams, they have size on the wing with Barnes and Ingram and all that, but it isn't the kind of size that bothers the Knicks the way that a team like Detroit or in some ways even Indiana did last year with that athleticism and kind of the physicality. So tonight I would predict they split these, and then they get then they get LA after that. That'll be interesting. LA, what's the fourth game of this stretch?
Denver.
So Denver in Mile High. Denver in Denver. The Knicks match up well with them, but we'll see. It's still going to be on the road. So I mean, for this stretch, if they can get out with 2-2, I'd be happy. I think they should be able to go 3-1. But the Lakers have also given them problems in the past. Luka and LeBron are very tough individual matchups. So if they can get out with 2-2, I'd be happy with that. 1-3 would be disappointing. And then of course they can't go 0-4 would be alarm bells. So that's kind of how I view the next the upcoming stretch.
Yeah. You like their chances against Toronto. This is a team that they've just been really, really good against now for years at this point. Really since they traded for OG Anunoby. So you hope they get the win, and more or less, again, they already had the advantage over Toronto in the season series. So it's a 3.5 game lead right now. It's actually like a 4.5 game lead because of that. But 5.5 is better than 4.5. So let's get that. And of the games you're playing this week, this is probably the one that you feel the best about. I know Denver's been struggling, but going to Mile High is not Mile High. Jesus, now you got me saying it. But going to Denver is always difficult, and Oklahoma City on the second half of back-to-back is difficult. I mean, that's not ideal. Lakers, again, national TV game, but it's the Lakers. Who knows? Weird things can happen. They have Luka Doncic and they have LeBron, who always feels like he likes to dial it up against the Knicks. So, I think ultimately just tonight is you got to get this one. You kind of have to get this one, and then if you drop to the next 3, you can live with that. But this is the one you kind of have to bank. So,
which is to your earlier point, right? Which is why it makes sense to play Mitch tonight, right? Especially you don't want to fall out of the 3 seed, right? So keep pushing for that and get bank of the wins. You're pretty confident.
Yeah, for sure. All right. That is our show for today. Thank you to everybody for the comments. Thank you for the super chats. Appreciate it. Thank you to our sponsor, FanDuel. Again, Knicks play tonight. They play OKC Wednesday. Me and Prez will probably record on Thursday, so we'll have that pod out for you on Friday. And be on the lookout for that. All right, that is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great week. Hopefully the Knicks have a great week. And I will see you all on Friday. Peace.